Assalamualaikum everyone. So today, my group and I will be presenting our collaborative poetry translation and analysis project. So for this project, we selected the poem The Grass So Little Has to Do by Emily Dickinson and translated it from English to Malay. In this presentation, we will first introduce the poet, and provide some background information about the poem. Next, we will present our Malay translation and explain the translation strategies we use. We will also review the translations. Then, we will analyze the poem's themes, literary devices, and overall message. Finally, each group member will share a brief reflection on what we learned throughout this collaborative task. Without further ado, let us begin. So, Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Fars. Next slide. Okay, Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Nia Anisa binti Muhammad Nazri and I translated stanza 3 and my role for this project is as a translator and the translation reviewer. So I will pass this over to my Fatin Christina.
Assalamualaikum and hi, my name is Fatin Christina binti Ahmad and I have translated stanza 5. So for my role for this discussion is as a translator and the translation reviewer.
Hi everyone, my name is Risanada binti Ahmad Rizal and I translated stanza 2. And my role for this assignment is as a translator and also literary analyst.
Hi, Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Nur Elsa Khadijah binti Ahmad and I translated stanza 1 and my role for this task is translator and translation reviewer.
Hi everyone, my name is Razana Zaida binti Fakhrul Azam. I translated stanza 4 and I'm a translator and also a literal analyst.
Okay, thank you everyone. So now we will move on to the introduction of the poet. So the poem we chose, the author is Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson was a renowned American poet who lived from 1830 to 1886. She is known for her distinctive poetic style and her exploration of themes such as nature, life, death, and human emotions. Although most of her poems were published after her death, and that only a few of her poems was published, she is now considered one of the greatest poets in American literature. Next. So, before analyzing the poem, it is important for us to understand the background of this poem. The Grass So Little Has to Do is a nature poem that reflects Emily Dickinson's admiration for the natural world. In this poem, Dickinson personifies grass by giving it human-like actions and responsibilities. Through this portrayal, she emphasizes that even something as ordinary as grass plays an important role in nature. The poem invites readers to appreciate the beauty and value of simple things that are often taken for granted. So now, we will be showing the original poem. This is the title, stanza 1, stanza 2, and stanza 3. And this is stanza 4 to stanza 5. And now we will be showing our Malay translation of the poem. This is the title, stanza 1 and stanza 2. And next we have stanza 3 to stanza 4 and stanza 5. So now we will be discussing the translation strategies. So I will be passing this over to translator 1.
Thank you, Nia. So now I will present my part of the translated version of stanza 1. So the first stanza of the poem describes the grass as a symbol of simplicity and calmness in nature. It presents the grass as something that has a very simple and effortless existence, surrounded by natural elements like butterflies, bees, and sunlight. These natural elements are personified, meaning they are given human-like actions such as interacting and responding gently with the grass. Overall, the stanza highlights the beauty of nature through its simplicity, showing how the grass exists peacefully and harmoniously within its surrounding. Now, in translating the first stanza of The Grass Has So Little to Do, I apply a combination of adaptation, semantic translation, modulation, and personification strategies to maintain the original meaning while ensuring the translation sounds natural in Malay. Firstly, I use an adaptation strategy for the phrase "the grass has so little to do." I translated it as "alangkah sederhananya tugas selai rumput" to make it sound more natural and poetic in Malay, while still preserving the idea of the grass having a simple and effortless existence. For the phrase a sphere of simple green, I applied semantic translation by using sebuah hamparan hijau yang bersahaja. Instead of translating sphere literally, I focused on conveying the image of white-green space to better reflect the atmosphere of the poem. So instead of I'm using sphere or mandala, I use the word hamparan because it fits the Malay context and creates a clearer image. I also use a modulation strategy for the phrase "with only butterflies to brood", translating it as "hanya dengan rama-rama yang berlega". This adjustment was made because the literal meaning of brood does not fit the context in Malay. So the expression was changed to better reflect the movement and imagery of butterflies around the grass. Lastly, I maintain the personification element in "and beast to attention" by translating it as "dan lebah yang dihiburkan". This preserved the original poetic style where the grass is given human-like qualities. Overall, these strategies help ensure that the translation remains faithful to the meaning and imagery of the original poem while adapting it appropriately to Malay. That's all from me.
Thank you, Translator 1. Now I'll be presenting stanza 2. So for stanza 2, Emily Dickinson personifies the grass by giving it human characteristics. The grass is described as moving to beautiful tunes carried by the breeze, holding sunlight in its lap and bowing to everything around it. These images create a peaceful and harmonious relationship between the grass and nature. So in my Malay translation, I tried to preserve the poetic imagery of the original poem while making it sound natural in Bahasa Melayu. The translation maintains the idea of the grass enjoying the breeze, sunlight, and its surroundings. So yeah, for stanza 2, the translation uses several strategies, which are literal translation, modulation, and transposition. Firstly, literal translation is used to keep the meaning as close as possible to the original text. For example, phrases like breezes are translated directly into hembusan bayu and pretty things becomes irama yang indah. This helps preserve the original imagery of the poem. Next, modulation is applied to make the sentence sound more natural in Bahasa Melayu. For instance, stir all day is translated as bergoyang sepanjang hari. The meaning is the same, but the expression is adjusted so it sounds smoother and more poetic in Malay. And last but not least, transposition is used by changing the grammatical structure to fit Malay language rules. For example, the breezes fetch along becomes yang dibawa oleh hembusan bayu. This change ensures the sentence flow naturally in Bahasa Melayu while maintaining the original meaning. So overall, these strategies help preserve both the meaning and the poetic beauty of the original stanza. That's all from me. I'll be passing it to translator 3.
Thank you. So now I will discuss the translation strategies used in stanza 3. So in this stanza, Dickinson describes how the grass is covered with dew throughout the night. The dew is compared to pearls, creating an image of the grass being beautifully decorated. So through personification, the grass appears to dress itself and become elegant. Other than that, Emily Dickinson further emphasizes nature's beauty by suggesting that even a duchess would seem ordinary in comparison. Therefore, this stanza highlights the extraordinary beauty that can be found in simple elements of nature. So the first strategy I use to translate this stanza is cultural adaptation. In the original poem, the word duchess is used to personify the grass. However, a direct translation would sound foreign in a Malay poem. Therefore, it was adapted into Sangsuri, which immediately evokes the image of a graceful and elegant noblewoman in Malay literary tradition. This helps preserve the poem's aesthetic and cultural resonance. The second strategy is compensating for the transposition of rhyme. To maintain the musicality of the poem, the order of some imagery was adjusted slightly. Although the literal structure changed, the poetic flow and end rhyme pattern was better preserved in the Malay version. The third strategy is semantic shift through melioration. So melioration means bettering something or improving something. So instead of using a direct translation for an ordinary action, the word menyulam was chosen, which means embroidery. This word elevates the image of grass collecting dew into something more artistic and poetic, which suits the whimsical tone of the poem. Finally, there is a contextual shift. The phrase too common was translated as kalah berseri. While it is not a literal equivalent, it conveys the intended meaning that the grass loses its radiance in comparison to the dew, while maintaining the beauty and poetic quality of the stanza. That is all from me. So now I'll be passing it to translator 4.
So next, in this stanza 4, Dickinson describes what happens to grass after it dies and becomes hay. So the grass is taken into sovereign barns, which suggests that barns are imagined like royal or grand places. Even in death, the grass is treated with dignity and respect. So in this stanza, several translation strategies are used to preserve both meaning and poetic effect. So first, literal poetic balance is applied. So the translation stays quite close to the original structure and meaning, while still maintaining a poetic flow in Malay. So this helps preserve the tone and rhythm of the original poem. Next, cultural substitution is used. For example, lowly spices or orders divine is translated as rempah-rempah sederhana and harum yang begitu suci. This makes the imagery more understandable for Malay readers while keeping the original idea of something humble yet fragrant. Then there is retention of imagery. So this is where the visual and sensory ideas from the original text are maintained. The sense of death being peaceful and fragrant is preserved through phrases like haruman yang begitu suci and terlena, which keep the gentle and calm mood of the stanza. Now finally, borrowing and retention of term is applied. So the word of spikenard is kept and presented as spikenard. This maintains the authenticity of the original botanical and cultural references while still giving clarification in Malay. So overall, these strategies work together to keep the poem both faithful to the original one and make it very meaningful for the Malay readers.
Alright, so thank you, translator 4. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is my Malay translation of the final stanza, which is stanza 5. So in this part, I translated the idea of the grass becoming hay and living a peaceful life inside a barn. So then I will explain to you all about the translation strategies that I have used for stanza 5. So first, I use literal translation for some parts. For example, lumbung yang megah comes from sovereign barns. I have translated it directly to keep the original meaning, but also I have adjusted it slightly so it sounds natural in Malay. It still shows a big or grain. It still shows a big or grand barn where the grass or hay stays peacefully. So the second one is I have used adaptation. The phrase dreams the days away was translated as bermimpi sepanjang hari. So the reason why I choose this is because a direct translation would sound awkward in Malay. So instead, I made it more natural while keeping the meaning that time is spent peacefully and slowly. So the third one is I focus on tone preservation. The line I wish I were a hay was translated as aku berharap aku adalah jerami. So this is important because I wanted to keep the feeling of longing. And the speaker is not just talking about grass, but also expressing a deep wish to live a peaceful and simple life like hay without stress or any responsibility. So overall, my translation tries to balance the meaning, natural Malay language, and also emotional tone. That's all for me.
Okay, thank you everyone. So now we will be moving on to the translation review. So I will be passing the floor to my Fatin.
All right. Thank you, Nia. So for my part, I will be the translation reviewer for the title and also the first stanza of the poem. So the title is Betapa Sedikit Tugas Sang Rumput, which sounds natural in Malay and also successfully keeps the original meaning, which shows that the grass has very little work to do. The main idea of simplicity is still preserved in the translation. So, if you look at the translation one in this stanza, the translation still maintains the idea of simplicity in nature. The grass is described as having a very easy and peaceful life, surrounded by butterflies and bees. But there are also a few areas that can be improved in the translation. For example, here the phrase "alangkah sederhananya tugas sehelai rumput" could be smoother and more natural in Malay. Next, the phrase "sebuah hamparan hijau yang bersahaja." I think this line could be made more poetic with better word choice. Moreover, the phrase "ramai-ramai yang berlega" could be improved to "berterbangan" because it sounds more accurate and also natural. And last but not least, lebah yang dihiburkan needs a clearer grammar because it sounds unclear in Malay language. And that's all from me. I'll pass to the next presenter.
Thank you, Mai. So now in this section, I will present my translator review of stanza 2 and stanza 3 of the poem, The Grass Has So Little to Do. As a reviewer, I will evaluate the translated version by my group members, focusing on how well the meaning, imagery, and poetic elements from the original poem are preserved in the target language. I'll also highlight the strengths of the translations as well as areas that could be improved, particularly in terms of accuracy, word choice, and how natural the translation sounds in Malay. For stanza 2, the translation shows us a strong use of personification where nature is described with human-like qualities and actions. This helps to maintain the poetic effect of the original poem. As the natural elements are given lifelike characteristics, the overall meaning is still very faithful to the source text, especially in preserving the imagery of movement, light, and natural harmony. The translated lines successfully reflect the calm and continuous flow of the nature, which is an important feature of the original poem. However, there are few areas that could be improved in terms of word choice and accuracy. The word bergoyang is slightly weak for the word stir as it does not fully reflect the gentle and continuous movement caused by the wind. Why? This reduces the softness intended in the original imagery. The phrase could be improved by using bergerak lembut or beralun to better express the natural and flowing motion. And in addition, the phrase mengikut irama yang indah is slightly interpretive and not directly stated in the original text, which makes it less faithful to the source meaning. It could be simplified or adjusted to remain closer to the original structure and intent without adding extra interpretation. Next. For stanza 3, a strong value of the translation is the effective use of semantic imagery, particularly in the phrase menyulam embun bagai mutiara, which successfully preserved the original visual metaphor of dew being compared to pearls. This shows a strong understanding of figurative language and helps maintain the poetic beauty of the original text. The stanza also maintains a strong poetic tone, with elegant and expressive language that reflects the stylistic features of the source poem. However, there are still several issues that need improvement in terms of accuracy and meaning preservation. The phrase tampil anggun mempesona slightly exaggerates the meaning of make itself so fine and introduces an additional layer of interpretation that is not present in the original poem. This makes the translation less precise. In addition, Malah Sang Suri Kala Berseri changes the meaning into a comparison of beauty and implies competition, which is not stated in the source text. This shifts the original idea away from subtle elegance toward a more dramatic expression. These changes affect the closeness of the translation to the original meaning. Overall, both stanzas demonstrate strong poetic translation skills, particularly in maintaining imagery and figurative language. However, there are still areas where improvement can be made in terms of accuracy, word choice, and staying closer to the original meaning. Despite these issues, the translated version still successfully conveys the general tone and poetic nature of the original poem. That is all from me.
Thank you, Alisa. So now I will be moving on to stanza 4. So the translation for stanza 4 generally conveys the original meaning. However, it sounds rather literal and rigid because some English expressions and sentence structures were transferred too directly into Malay. So there are several areas that could be improved. First, the line dan walaupun ia mati ia berlalu that repeats the pronouns ia twice, which disrupts the rhythm of the poem. So I suggest combining the ideas into a smoother structure that would create a more elegant poetic flow. Second, the phrase rempah rendah is not commonly used in Malay. The more natural and idiomatic expression would be rempah ratus, which readers can easily understand. Third, the phrase dibaringkan untuk tidur sounds literal. Replacing it with diadukan or bersemayam would create a softer and more poetic tone that is more suitable for the context. Lastly, the word spikenard may feel unfamiliar to Malay readers, and fortunately, there is an equivalent to spikenard. So instead of using spikenard, you can use narwastu, which is the Malay equivalent that would improve the readability while retaining the original reference of the poem. Next. So now let's look at stanza 5. So overall, the translation successfully captures the whimsical and imaginative tone of the original poem. However, some of the imagery and word choices can be refined to better suit Malay poetic conventions. So the first example is menetap di lumbung yang megah. So the word lumbung usually refers to a granary and does not fully convey the grandeur intended in the original poem. So a phrase such as bangsal megah would be more appropriate. In addition, replacing menetap with bersemayam would introduce a stronger sense of royalty and elegance since we're talking about bangsal megah. And the second example is rumput hanya mempunyai sedikit tugas untuk dilakukan. So this line is rather lengthy and prose-like. It's too heavy for a whimsical poem. So a more concise version such as alangkah senang tugas sang rumput or just repeating the title betapa sedikit tugas sang rumput would improve the rhythm and poetic quality of the poem. Finally, the phrase aku berharap aku adalah jerami sounds somewhat flat in Malay poetry. So replacing it with kalaulah aku jerami introduces a sense of longing and wistfulness, making the emotion more expressive and poetic. So I think these revisions would help the translation sound more natural, aesthetically pleasing, and aligned with the conventions of Malay poetry. So next. So now I will be passing this over to our literary analyst.
Thank you, Nia. Okay, so now I'll be explaining about the theme analysis. So, for the theme analysis of the poem The Grass Has So Little to Do by Emily Dickinson, there are three main themes that can be identified. First and foremost, the theme of beauty and simplicity is clearly shown throughout the poem. The poet describes grass as something very simple and ordinary, yet she presents it in a beautiful and almost elegant way. Even something as small as grass is described with rich and poetic imagery, which shows that simplicity itself can be beautiful if we take time to notice it. And secondly, the poem highlights the appreciation of nature. Emily Dickinson portrays nature as lively and full of gentle movement, such as butterflies, bees, breeze, and also sunshine. These natural elements are not shown as chaotic, but instead as harmonious and meaningful. So this reflects the poet's deep appreciation of nature and its quiet beauty. And last but not least, the theme of contentment and peace is expressed through the calm and relaxed tone of the poem. The grass is described as having so little to do, yet it still exists peacefully and beautifully. This suggests a sense of satisfaction and harmony with life. The ending line, where the speaker wishes to be like the hay, also reflects a desire for a peaceful and simple existence. So overall, I think the poem encourages readers to appreciate simplicity, value nature, and find contentment in a peaceful and uncomplicated life. So I'll be passing it to Farzana Zahida.
Okay, so for the literal devices analysis, in the first stanza, the poet describes grass as something very simple. So it says that it has a saying that it says so little to do. However, she quickly shows that this simplicity is actually full of life. The grass is described as a sphere of simple green, which suggests it is like its own small, perfect world. It also entertains butterflies and broods bees, which are examples of personification. This means the grass is given human-like roles, which makes nature feel active and alive. In the second stanza, the grass is shown as constantly moving and interacting with nature. It stirs all day to pretty tunes carried by the breeze, which creates a peaceful and musical image. The grass is also described as holding sunshine in its lap, another example of personification. This makes the grass seem gentle and caring, as if it's nourishing light itself. It also bows to everything, suggesting humility and harmony with nature. In the third stanza, the focus shifts to nighttime. The grass threads the dews like pearls, which is a simile comparing dewdrops to precious jewels. This shows how beautiful and delicate nature is. The grass also makes itself so fine that even a duchess would seem ordinary to notice it. This exaggeration suggests that nature is even more elegant than human social status or royalty. In the fourth stanza, the poet describes the grass even in death. Instead of something negative, death is shown as something peaceful and beautiful. The grass leaves behind odors so divine and is compared to lowly spices and spikenard. These images create a calm and spiritual feeling. It suggests that even dying is part of nature's beauty and cycle. Next.
Okay, so now we will be moving on to our reflections. So I will begin first. I think this project taught me that poetry translation is not only about language, but also understanding literary elements and conveying emotions effectively. Because poems is art, and the author has a certain message that they want to bring. So translating it so by translating it, we need to understand what the message is actually about. And I think by working together with my group members, I learned how different interpretations can contribute to a stronger translation and analysis. So overall, the experience improved both my literary awareness and collaborative skills. So now I will give the floor to my Fatin Christina.
All right. So for me, in conclusion, this translation activity has helped me understand that translating poetry is not just about changing the words from English to Malay, but it also requires understanding the meaning, the tone, and also the emotion behind each line. Moreover, I also learned that different translation strategies like literal translation, adaptation, and tone preservation are also very important in keeping the poem meaningful. So overall, this task helped me to improve my translation skills and also made me appreciate how challenging and creative poetry translation can be. That's all from me. Now I'll pass to the next presenter.
So through this translation task, I faced several challenges as a book translator and translation reviewer. One of the main challenges was finding suitable equivalents in Malay for certain English expressions that do not have direct translation. This required me to apply appropriate translation strategies rather than relying on literal translation. Another challenge was maintaining the balance between accuracy and creativity. As a translator, I had to ensure the poem remained natural and readable in Malay while still preserving the original meaning and poetic tone. And as a reviewer, I also needed to critically evaluate whether the translated text stayed faithful to the source text or whether certain parts became too interpretive. Uh, this task helped me develop a better understanding of how translation requires careful decision making, especially in literal text where meaning, tone, and imagery must all be preserved. And in conclusion, this translation exercise demonstrates that effective translation requires the use of different strategies to preserve both meaning and style. The process involves not only translating words, but also ensuring that the overall tone and imagery of the original text are maintained in the target language. As a translation reviewer, I learned to identify strengths and weaknesses in translated work, particularly in terms of accuracy and natural language use. Uh, and overall, this task highlights that successful translation requires a balance between um, authenticity to the source text and adaptability to the target language. That is all from me. I'll be passing to the next person.
Okay, thank you, Translator 1. So, from my personal experience from translating stanza 2, I learned that poetry translation is not only about translating words directly, but it requires a deeper understanding of the poem's meaning and intention. So, we also need to preserve the imagery, emotion, and beauty of the original poem, not just the literal meaning of each word. So, also through this task, I realized that even a simple piece can carry strong visual and emotional impact, and changing it too literally may cause the poem to lose its poetic effect. So this is why strategies like modulation and transposition are important, as they help maintain both meaning and natural flow in the target language. And moreover, this activity also helped me become more aware of how language works differently across English and Bahasa Melayu. Some expressions cannot be translated word for word because they could sound unnatural and lose their poetic tone. And overall, this experience helped me appreciate both the poem itself and the challenges of literary translation. So it also made me realize that a good translation is not just accurate, but also expressive and meaningful to the reader. So that is all from me. So I will be passing it to the next presenter.
So after doing this task, I realized that word for word translation was not enough. I needed to apply strategies like cultural substitution and imagery retention to make the stanza more meaningful for even the Malay readers, while still staying faithful to the original text. So, for example, translating lowly spices and rempah-rempah sederhana help maintain the idea of simplicity in a way that feels more familiar to the target audience. Another important decision that I made was when to retain original terms like spikenard. Keeping it with an added Malay explanation allowed the translation to remain authentic while still being understandable. So this showed me that sometimes foreign elements should be preserved to protect the culture and historical context of the poem itself. So overall, this task made me realize that translation is not just about language conversion, but also about interpreting tone, imagery, and emotion of a certain poem or any text. So a good translation must respect both the original author's intention and the reader's cultural understanding. So that's all from me.
So, before we end, This project has also shown us that the value of collaboration, as we were able to learn from one another's perspective and improve our understanding of both literature and translation. Thank you for your attention. That's all from us. Thank you.